Oh, good. I hope you can hear me now. I'm really or is someone else speaking? Oh, great. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for being here. You'll bear with me if I go off. I'm sure someone will let me know, and I will hand over to someone else to take over. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for Dr. Ephraim Mhlanga, who is here today, who will be taking us the week. Dr. Ephraim Mhlanga is a specialist in quality assurance in higher education at the South African Institute of Distance Education. And this is not his first seminar in quality assurance. Last year, he had a seminar on quality assurance in e-learning and open education resources. So we are happy to have you, Dr. Mhlanga, and it will really be nice to listen to you and to have you the whole week. Of course, the whole session will be recorded and it will be available. There's already a session with an interview that we had with him some time ago, so it's there in the YouTube, so in the Emerge Africa YouTube, so you can also listen to that later. We shall be continuing this later. So I think I will Dr. Mhlanga himself and start the session. Kindly questions, your comments in the text as we move on, and then we can see if after a while Dr. Mhlanga will want to answer some of the questions. So we'll see how that goes. Thank you so much and welcome, Dr. Mhlanga. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Irene, and welcome everybody to today's session, live session of this week's workshop. As you all know, it's a workshop on quality assuring e-learning, and so I think the idea is that we share ideas and experiences on how we can be able to quality assure that mode of delivery. I would like to start by making reference to the few slides that I prepared for this particular session. And the first slide is actually a quotation I got from Professor Ehlers. And if you can be able to move, yes, thanks very much, Jacob. That quotation, I think, is very vital in terms of reminding us of the role of quality and quality assurance in educational delivery. I read it. It is vital that every child goes to school. However, access alone is not enough. We need to ensure that once children are in school, they also learn. Of course, this is talking from a schooling perspective, but the same equally applies even in higher education. It is not enough to provide access to higher education. It is important that when we provide that access, we must also provide quality provisioning at that level. So that statement speaks eloquently to the issue of quality and the need for higher education institutions to therefore find means and ways of assuring quality, not only in e-learning but in all forms of in all modes of provision. Traditionally, academics in higher education institutions have been very subjective in terms of the way they quality assure what they do, the way they quality assure their programs, the way they assure their teaching and learning processes, as well as the way they conduct the assessment processes in their institutions. They have been largely been fairly subjective. Any attempts at interrogating those aspects are in fact sometimes interpreted as interference with the academic autonomy the autonomy of academics in higher education. But I think with the changing times, we now need to move further and further away from the subjective ways of quality assuring our work and our processes to more objective ways of doing those kinds of things and providing that kind of service. And so we see a lot of developments that have been happening over years in terms of quality assuring higher education, and a lot of national quality assurance agencies coming on board and putting in place all sorts of regulatory mechanisms, quality regulatory mechanisms, to ensure that higher education is provided in credible ways and to the best benefit of not only the students but also our societies in general. But I think not much has been happening in that respect in the area of e-learning, because this seems to be a new development that has happened over the past few years, particularly in our developing context. But more and more institutions, like we saw last year in the Image Africa workshop that we held last year, more and more institutions are now going for e-learning, and we have more and more students participating in e-learning programs. And therefore the need for us to quality assure that mode of delivery becomes very, very important, and hence this workshop. So yes, I think we need to find means and ways of ensuring that we regulate e-learning provision from a quality perspective. This is a very fuzzy area, if I might say, especially in terms of the concepts. The moment you begin to talk of quality assurance, of e-learning, people question what exactly is it you are talking about. So I think the most logical thing to do during this session is probably to start with some conceptual clarity on some of those terms. If we can move on to the third slide, Jacob. We have questions that we designed before this this workshop, and those questions are meant to generally guide us throughout the week, and they do touch on some of those concepts that we need to define, so we probably can strike a common understanding of what we mean by each and every one of them before we can be able to say then how do we handle them from a quality assurance perspective. So one of those questions is, do you offer e-learning in your institution? And if so, for how long have you been offering this, and in what discipline? We did get a lot of responses from people on that, and yes, people indicated they have been offering e-learning. Some are planning to offer e-learning in their institutions. There are responses that show that there are people who have been offering e-learning for the past 12 or so years. And so they do have quite a bit of experience in terms of that mode of delivery. I hope we're going to benefit from them in terms of their experiences insofar as quality assuring that e-learning is concerned. But perhaps that question, like I said, requires us first and foremost to strike a common understanding of what we mean by e-learning. We will obviously also need to understand, to strike a common understanding of quality before we can be able to say what it is we want to quality assure. In other words, what is e-learning? What is good quality e-learning? And how do we quality assure e-learning? we can move on to the next slide, Jacob. So I do have in that slide a grid helps us understand the areas in which technology is used in order to support learning. And within that diagram, then perhaps we can be able to identify what e-learning is and where perhaps it fits on the grid. We've been grappling with this aspect of use of technology in teaching and learning here. We work with institutions in various countries on the continent, and we see, like I said, a variety of ways in which that technology is used. And so we on the vertical axis tried to plot different levels of use of technology in teaching and learning. At the very bottom, we have what we call fully offline offerings, program offerings. In other words, there is no use of any form of technology at all. And in other words, there is completely offline provision of education. As we go up the next level, we have programs that are digitally supported. They are not dependent entirely on digital media, but they are supported once in a while through those kinds of media. And these can be in the form of external devices, for instance, like CD-ROMs, where stuff like reading materials or even assignment can be saved on CD-ROMs or on memory sticks and be given to students. And further up, we have internet-supported programs where occasionally students have to log in on internet and access materials, reading materials, including sometimes assignments, as well as tutorial letters. And further up, we have internet-dependent programs. In other words, programs it is mandatory for any student enrolled in that program to be online in order to be able to learn. And so that kind of provision requires one to be dependent on internet in order to learn. And right at the top, of course, we have the fully online. So as we go up that vertical axis, we get more and more use of technology, and people, learners as well as academics, rely entirely on technology in order to support those programs. So that's what we have on the vertical axis. But also we tried to look at where learners learn. Do they have to be on campus in order to learn? Or can they learn from home? Or can they learn from wherever they will be, maybe workplaces? In other words, we consider the spatial distance aspect of learning, distance from the campus. So students will come to campus on a daily basis, but we realize that in some instances, they don't necessarily always have face-to-face encounters. They actually come on campus and they go to computer labs, go to libraries, they log in, and they access a whole lot of resources which they need in order to learn. So they can be students on campus, but are relying largely on technology in order to learn. But we also have students who come on campus, they attend face-to-face sessions for some time, and for the other time, when they are not in face-to-face sessions, they rely on technology in order to do. So on that vertical axis, as we move from the left to the right, with those campus-based kinds of students, right up to the extreme end where we have students who are very far away from their campuses almost every time. And they either can use other forms of learning resources which do not require them to have or to use technology, or they can use digitally supported materials, or they can use internet supported materials, or they can be fully online. In that plane of that grid, we have a variety of forms of offerings that show the extent to which technology is used, as well as the spatial distance of a student from campus. And when you look at what actually happens in institutions, you find there are always shifts in terms of individual programs and how they are offered on that plane. So you have, for instance, a program moving from B to that B at the bottom, close to C, to B at the top, close to D. One therefore may decide that no, my students are learning for most of the time away from campus, and they are only accessing a limited number of materials in hard copy form, as well as some bits of materials that was saved on CD-ROMs. You may decide, no, you want them to access more resources, and therefore you want them to be internet dependent, so that they can be able to access not only what I give them, but also what they search on internet and find on their own. And so you move your program right to the top, but also towards the right. And so in our attempts at defining what e-learning is, perhaps that grid will be very useful. We understand e-learning to be learning that is dependent on electronic devices like computers or iPads or even cell phones, I think smartphones in some instances. And so we would like you from that grid during the course of this week to tell us what your understanding of e-learning is, and whether you think that grid is helpful in terms of explaining the kind of program that you've been offering at your institution through e-learning. I find that grid extremely helpful in terms of understanding the concept of e-learning. Okay. I'm aware that there are a number of questions that are being posted, but perhaps I'll try and address them at the end. If we can move on to the next slide, which tries to unpack the concepts of the concept of quality initially. We seek good quality teaching so that we can be able to maximize the learning gains by students. I think that's the key thing, that's the core thing in quality assurance. How much do students gain from the learning experiences they go through? So our teaching, our resources, and even the programs we design have to be good quality for us to be able to meet that goal. But of course, then people always ask, how then do I know that this program is of good quality? How do I know that the materials I have developed are of good quality? How do I know that the way I support my students is of good quality? It is difficult because, of course, the notion of quality is a bit fuzzy. Quality is a relative term, and I always use this example that is it like beauty that lies in the eyes of the beholder, like what some other people want to argue. Yes, indeed, it is relative, but there is a sense in which at any one point, in any one context, one has to be able to define the quality which they go by, relative as the term may be. So we, from a theoretical point of view, have two notions of quality. The subjective notion of quality that I made reference to earlier on, that perhaps that's traditionally what has been obtained in universities amongst academics, who have not been used to getting outsiders looking at how they do their teaching and how they do the designing of their programs and how they manage their assessment processes. And they believe they have the expertise it takes to be able to offer quality teaching and learning. And so they believe what they offer or what they offered is of good quality. Sometimes we call that the artistry aspect of quality assurance, relying on the expertise that is in an individual in order to ensure that there is quality. Once you have somebody who has the relevant expertise, then it's enough. That person can be able to do whatever they do and you will be assured of quality. So, like I said, in education, we are trying, I think, to move away from that subjective notion of quality so that we go for the more objective notion of quality. We go for the kind of quality that can be seen by outside stakeholders. In other words, people who are not necessarily within the university community. If it is a course, if it is an online course, for instance, outsiders should be able to see, perhaps through the changes that take place in your students, that indeed your online course is a quality course. Outsiders should be able to see that your online course is a good quality course through maybe the way you support your students, the materials that you give to your students. And so, yes, I think our challenge here is to find those objective mechanisms of ensuring that our online courses and the online delivery is of good quality. And how do we then make that objective? I think we try to do that by setting ourselves certain standards to achieve. In other words, we benchmark our performance, whether it is in an online course or in a face-to-face encounter course. We have to find ways of benchmarking how we perform in setting standards, setting ourselves targets that we strive to achieve over a period of time. And so those standards that you set yourselves to achieve become your quality. So at any one time, you strive to achieve certain standards. So that's how I would like to define quality in very, very simple terms. The standards that one sets himself or herself to achieve within a given period of time. Okay. The next slide then tries to unpack what quality assurance is. If we understand our standards, if we understand the targets that we set ourselves to achieve in a given period of time, then what we do is to put in place mechanisms that will enable us to achieve those targets. In other words, we have something that assures us and everybody else that we are going to achieve those standards. And so quality assurance simply consists of systems, mechanisms, processes that are put in place in order to ensure that standards that are set are achieved. And you can therefore see that it is a proactive process. Quality assurance is a proactive process. You put it in place in order to make sure that you achieve those standards. Of course, you do some form of monitoring in between. It is different from quality control, which is a reactive process. In quality control, you do a process. At the end of the process, you look at your achievements, and you if it is in a factory, then you isolate those products that are defective so that they don't go to the consumer. But the damage has already been done. In the services like in education, we as much as possible would like to avoid that damage. And so we cannot achieve to rely on quality control. At the end of a 3-year program, we discover that 60-70% of the students who were enrolled in the program failed. What then do we do with them? We would rather set in place mechanisms that ensure right from the beginning that we will get close to 100% of our students enrolled in a program passing. So quality assurance is a proactive process from that point of view. I hope that we can be able to do this in e-learning. I know questions that could be running through your minds are, so how do I set those standards in e-learning? And where do I start? And how do I monitor and to ensure that indeed all my students who register for my course are going to pass? Yes, we have to find ways of doing that. It's not easy. That's what we are grappling with. But I think there are ways of going around those problems. So the next slide is simply reinforcing what we've talked about, what I've talked about in the previous 2 slides. The need to make our quality assurance processes as objective as possible. So we need to do the same in e-learning. And let me point out that whilst a lot of national quality assurance agencies can now regulate face-to-face programs, they are not yet regulating programs rolled out through e-learning. It is still quite a challenging area. And I think academics who offer these programs have to take the initiative to try and come up with objective ways of assuring those programs, even before the national quality assurance agencies pounce on us. So yes, like I said, quality assurance is meant to enable us to improve what we do on a day-to-day basis, but it is also meant to prove to outside stakeholders that indeed what we are doing is of good quality, especially those that are paying for the students who enroll on our programs. We need to ensure that they are in fact paying for quality service. So I would like to hear from those colleagues who have been rolling out e-learning programs for 10, 12 or even more years, how they have been quality assuring their programs, their e-learning programs. We can move on to the next one. I say back to the questions, those questions that I made reference to at the beginning, that we designed some questions that we will constantly visit during the course of this week, although we received a lot of responses on them. Do you offer e-learning in your institution? If so, for how long have you been offering this, and in what disciplines? What measures do you use to ensure that you offer high quality e-learning? I would like just a few people to post their responses to the first question so that we can share with others. I'm particularly interested in the programs. In what programs have you been offering e-learning? I wonder whether there is a trend, that's what I'm looking for, in terms of the kinds of programs where e-learning is being rolled out in most of our institutions. Yes, so how do you offer e-learning and programs specifically? Let's see if there are any programs that are going to be posted there. I am particularly interested in trends in terms of the programs because of the arguments I get from people every now and then that there are certain programs where they think e-learning cannot be implemented. There are other programs where they think it is easy to do so. This one is from Africa University in Zimbabwe. So far we don't offer e-learning programs but are preparing to offer them. In which programs are you preparing to offer them? In finance, at Africa University, they are planning to offer e-learning in finance and management. Okay, finance and management. Anybody else? Somebody says, currently we're doing capacity building for professors to use technology process to increase student engagement, which are across the range of face-to-face, blending and fully online. Yes, which is a general trend. So I'm focusing not on the programs but on the practices in a set of programs. Okay, Nancy. So it's a whole set of programs that are going to be offered in various ways. Okay. Tony says at UCT lots of blended programs, mainly face-to-face and augmented with online resources and interaction. There's a growing number of blended courses, mostly in professional areas where students are mostly away from campus. Yes. And some are completely online and often in the form of short courses. And I suppose it's commerce has led the way, he says. It's mostly those people who work who tend to go for these online courses because they do not have the opportunity to come to campus, but also they have access to technology, easy access to technology. Yes, Tony mentions MOOCs across several disciplines, and I'm sure some of you might have actually participated in some of the MOOCs. Okay, so we have commerce, we have programs like management, we also have finance. Antoinette from Namibia says, we do not offer programs online, but only certain courses from certain programs. These tend to be from the management field. Again, management features there, just like what Africa University is planning to roll out. Okay, that's fine. I think if during the course of the week we continue sharing on these aspects, we can be able to come up with some kind of trend at the end, and that will help us, I think, as we try to think of the kinds of quality assurance instruments that we should come up with for our own context. And can I ask you to post on the second question there, what measures do you use to ensure that you offer high quality e-learning? Anybody would like to give us their views on that? Okay. Yes, we are aware of the infrastructure constraints when it comes to e-learning in our African universities, but I think most of them are getting better and better every day. Yes, Mohammed in Egypt says they are developing a course in all faculties in their universities. What measures, if we can shift to the next question, what measures do you use to ensure that you offer good quality e-learning? Any experiences that we can share there? Okay, there is peer reviews, there's first level, there's collection of data from students, there is also write-up of lessons learned in the implementation process, there is regular review from teaching and the learning center and the university. Yes, Tony says in blended courses, it is often the standard course evaluation. I suppose that involves students as well who take that course, Tony. Yes, Nancy says the lessons learned are shared publicly, and she gives a site where we can be able to see those lessons learned. That's great, that's wonderful. Again, we will continue to share around this area during the course of the week. The next slide shows some of the responses we got from our survey, from some people, to the same question. How do you make sure that the e-learning you roll out in your institution or in your program is of good quality? Some people say they do online monitoring 24 hours and 7 days of the week. So online monitoring is one of those. If those people can be able to give us more information on how exactly they do the monitoring. But yes, that's an important practice to do in order to uphold your quality in online learning. Somebody also says there is careful selection of electronic material. Okay, I suppose to make sure that only good materials are put up on the learning management system for students to access. The other challenge we have with e-learning is how we guide students as they search on the internet to be able to select good materials from bad materials. Are there any mechanisms that you use in order to induct your students to select good materials from the internet? Because there's almost anything and everything on internet. The other point here is that people do feedback analysis. I guess they get feedback from a whole lot of stakeholders, including students, and they do analysis of that feedback and probably act on the basis of that feedback. Yes, somebody there is saying they are interested in working on the development of standards for tertiary education in Africa, and they have been working on this for 10 years in the US. We may need an African model. Yes, indeed, we need an African model, and this is the whole idea behind all this discussion, even for e-learning, not only for teacher education, but for the whole range of programs that we offer in management, in finance, in commercial subjects. We need to come up with standards that are contextually relevant. Yes, we also got responses that show that there is comparison with other providers in terms of their products as well as the services they offer. Some people do literature reviews, I suppose, in order to gain better understanding of how good quality e-learning is rolled out. And there is using some international quality assurance standards for e-learning and others from our environment. Yes, that's what one of our colleagues is saying there, that perhaps we need to develop our own. There are a lot of standards that have been developed, quality standards that have been developed elsewhere, and the question is, are they relevant for your particular context? Are you able to use them as they are, or do you need to tweak them in order to make them more relevant? Or do you need to develop your own standards that are most appropriate for your own purposes? The other one here is we build quality into the design of constructively aligned course-specific outcomes and activities for e-learning. Okay, in other words, building quality into activities, the kinds of activities that e-learning students engage in. And the last one I have here is we've established a virtual and open distance learning directorate to spearhead the quality issues and assist all faculties and train users. So you can see that people are already doing all sorts of things in order to make sure that they uphold quality in e-learning. Okay. And Mustafa says standards have to be based on current research. I would love to continue this discussion with the presenter. Yes, I think we need to continue this discussion. And yes, indeed, I think standards have to be good standards. Have to be based on sound research, which is also contextual as well as international. And those standards, if we base them on that kind of research, will not be static. They will be dynamic standards. They will constantly change. We will need to constantly tweak them in order to keep them abreast with the changes within our context and internationally. I totally agree with you that yes, we need to base our quality standards not only on our experiences, but also on research. Okay, I will move on to the next slide. So we have at SAIDE also tried to look at what is existing elsewhere by way of standards quality standards that can be used for quality assuring, blended as well as online courses. We've also tried to come up with our own instrument that we used at some point for some of the online and blended courses that were developed by partners that we were working with. And I thought perhaps it would be a good idea for me to share those with you during this session. So working with standards is one good way we can make our quality assurance objective. There is the online evaluation instrument. It's in the form of an Excel spreadsheet. I think it has 3 pages, but I'm only interested in on page 2. There is a link that was provided in the forum for that resource, the online evaluation instrument. If you click to that link, you will be able to access the resource. And so you will find that we tried to limit the areas that need to be quality assured when it comes to online learning. And we think those are some of the key areas where we need to tighten the quality belts. In other words, we need to make sure that we have developed stringent quality guidelines in those areas. The first is the design of those online courses. How do we design them? I think that's the first critical thing to do. When we've made a decision to roll out a course online, I think you then have to make sure that you design your online course appropriately. I've seen a lot of occasions where stuff is just dumped on learning management systems for use by students for online learning. I don't think the online courses have to be appropriately designed. So there are a lot of design aspects, course design aspects that one has to look at when it comes to online learning, just like in face-to-face programs and face-to-face courses. the courses have to be designed in a particular way for them to be good quality courses. And then we thought course activities are very important. Perhaps that's what one is calling here e-activities, because it's in e-learning. The kinds of activities that make your online students engage with concepts and with issues that are pertinent to your discipline. And so those activities are carefully designed and carefully paced in order to enable that kind of engagement to take place. And then, of course, there is the assessment. How do you assess in online programs? I think there is a general criticism leveled against online courses relating to assessment. People argue that when we assess online, we mostly tend to focus on the very simple recall and remember type of items at the expense of the high skill kind of competencies and skills, like the evaluative skills, the application kinds of skills, the creative kinds of skills. We tend to focus largely on the remembering type of knowledge. So it's a general criticism that we hear from people who are against e-learning. So we need to protect ourselves against those kinds of criticisms by demonstrating that no, in fact, our assessment systems are just as rigorous as in any other mode of delivery. And then there are those aspects of online learning that are purely technological that we have to deal with, like the technological systems in place and the skills that your students have, the skills that your tutors have, and how you go out to support your students so that they don't grapple all the time with technological issues at the expense of learning proper. So yes, that online evaluation instrument is structured around those key aspects of online learning, and we think it would be worthwhile for one to think of the kinds of guidelines that can be developed around those four areas. Okay, the next slide is about the Quality Matters instrument. A lot of people know about this particular instrument developed by, I think, it's an American organization. The Quality Matters has those 8 or so standards. The course overview and introduction of a course, an online course. Is there such an overview? Is there an introduction, a proper introduction? Are there learning objectives included, and are they effectively and clearly communicated to online students? Is there an assessment? Is there any form of measuring how a student is faring? And are the instructional materials provided the right type, the right amount? And is there learner interaction and learner engagement? And how about the technology? How about the learner support? And that which they call accessibility. And under each one of those, then they define a number of quality guidelines or quality elements that one can use. Again, I think it's a handy tool to use, but perhaps one needs to look at some of the advantages and shortcomings of using that kind of instrument. In the wake of time, I think we can move on to the next slide, which in fact I didn't put there, but which is a concluding slide. So I think we've touched on a number of aspects about quality and quality assurance after we tried to generate some understanding of what e-learning is. And after that, we have looked at some possible ways of making our online programs good programs, and how we can try and maximize learning gains through those programs by the way we support our learners, by the materials we give to our learners. And therefore, I think what we want to establish during the course of this week is it possible that we can be able, from our experiences, to come up with some kind of guidelines that we can put together and that we can distribute amongst ourselves and panel beat and come up with something that we can use in institutions in order to enhance the quality of online learning. So I'm looking forward to what people are posting over the week, and I will be responding to those posts regularly. And in the end, I hope we are going to end up with a draft instrument. Let me, at this point, entertain any questions that people may have, burning questions that people may have. You can post them in there and I will respond to them.
Dr. Mhlanga, as you wait for them to post, there was one that was raised a little earlier.
Yes.
About equity, about quality and equity. So Nancy, yes. Nancy says, I'm listening for issues around quality and equity, which has been coming up a lot in many circles in my life. So,
yes.
What is your take on quality and equity as we wait for the others to type their questions? Yes, thank you.
Yes, the two are very much interrelated when it comes to educational provision. I think if we are to have equitable access to education and educational facilities, we must also take into account the quality of that provision. For instance, if you surmise that in your country rural children are not provided with sufficient education, and then you probably build schools and then they have somewhere to go in order to learn, you must then provide them with sufficient resources like books, like teachers, so that they can also get good quality education. Otherwise, if you don't provide them with good quality education, you will not have done much in order to achieve equity. So equity and quality in terms of education tends to go hand in glove. And everything goes down to the very first quotation that I had, that let's not only focus on providing access, let's also focus on providing epistemic access, quality access. And a week ago, in fact last month, the whole of July, I was facilitating a Commonwealth of Learning forum discussion on quality and equity in learning. And I can refer the participant to the relevant site, and you can be able to see some of the summarizations that we made on that topic out of the discussions that we held that month. So yes, the two are intricately related when it comes to educational provision. Yes, there is a question here. I wonder if we always assess equity first and use that as a launchpad to any other assessments for quality. Okay, what comes first? I'm not really sure what comes first, or if the two things don't always work together. Probably, yes, you may think of putting in place the right facilities for people to access education, but as you do that, you must have already planned. You must have already planned the quality of education that you're going to offer them. Because if you don't do that, then you will not have put in place mechanisms to ensure that you will roll out good quality education. So quality assurance processes must be thought about, must be planned for, They must be put in place right from the offset. You may not achieve the standards that you want to actually achieve when you start, but you strive, you work towards achieving them. You will have defined them already, and you will know what exactly you want to achieve, and you work towards them. Yes.
Since we are little over our time, so probably you can answer one more question, and then we can continue the discussion in the forums, please. Thank you.
Yes, that's right. I'm looking for questions here. This was the first one. I'm trying to figure out this one. Nancy, it doesn't look like it's a question. With my younger students from The Hague University no longer teaching this course, their own agency as a learner in the world seems to predicate the quality. I don't see that anymore. I think it has moved. Yes, I don't think it's a question. I think it's just a post that she put. Irene, I don't think there are any more questions to answer in this session. If people have any, please just post them in the forum during the course of this week, and I'll be happy to respond to them. But also just to remind you that we have another 1 hour live session on Thursday this week, starting at the same time, 3:30 Central African time.
Oh, thank you so much. This has been a wonderful session. 1 hour already and some few minutes on top. We've provided the links to the forum, and we can continue the discussions there. We shall be sending you a few reminders of the next live meeting that we shall have on Thursday. We are looking forward to having all of you join us again. And we wish to thank Dr. Mhlanga for such a wonderful presentation. There are so many people who've offered some collaboration of some sort here and there. So I hope we can take it all into the forum and then come up with something by the end of the week. So,
yes.
Dr. Mhlanga, any last words before we close down the session, please?
I will be very happy and excited if we manage to come up with a draft tool at the end of the week. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, everyone. For those who are in the morning, have a good day. For those who are in the evening, have a good evening. And let's see you on Thursday. And also in the forums, we can also write your own topics. If you feel what we've raised is not addressing what you'd like, you can also raise your own topic in the forum. Please feel free. And so have a good evening, and thank you very much for being here. See you on Thursday and see you online. Bye for now.
Thank you very much, and bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Irene and Ephraim, for this excellent session. Irene, I'm happy that we had power and electricity and connection to you in Kenya. And thank you to you, Ephraim, as well. What I'm going to do now is to switch off the recording of this session.